Welcome, Irish fans, to another quick edition of the Irish Breakdown podcast. I'm Vince Didera, the football analyst here at irishbreakdown.com. And with me, as always, is Brian Driscoll. He is the publisher at irishbreakdown.com. And a little breaking news for today that we wanted to talk about real quick. We all got emails this morning from Notre Dame to announce that head coach Brian Kelly has promoted Brian Polian and Mike Elston. Which is very interesting. I'll quickly here read what was sent out. University of Notre Dame, Dick Corbett head football coach Brian Kelly announced 2 promotions on his staff Monday. Brian Polian has been named associate head coach in addition to his special teams coordinator title, while Mike Elston will continue to serve as Bob and Leslie Moore family defensive line coach and has added the titles of recruiting coordinator and run game coordinator. So basically, they kind of swap positions.
And Elston added a new one.
And Elston added the fact that he's going to be an offensive run game coordinator. No. He's the run game coordinator on the defensive side of the ball, which I guess makes sense since he's the line or he's the defensive line coach. Brian, I'm going to ask you. I'll pretend that I'm the novice fan here. Why? Why are they swapping titles? What
well,
sense does that
reason
make?
number one is pay raises. Okay. I mean, that's that's fine. I mean, look, you have the success that you have. You find ways to get your coaches more money. That's how a good head coach should be doing things.
Well, and a lot of people were reporting the fact that Mike Elston was potentially going to be a defensive coordinator candidate. I forget where.
Purdue was one place. He had
Purdue.
multiple offers to leave Notre Dame this offseason. And I'm gonna have a video and an article at irishbreakdown.com talking about how it's not getting talked about a lot because we're talking about Marcus Freeman, and we should be talking about Marcus Freeman, but keeping Mike Elston on staff when he was passed over for the defensive coordinator job, job that I think a lot of people thought he had earned.
Third time.
Yeah, and a lot of people thought he had earned the right to have a shot at that. You know, to keep him on staff, number one, says a lot about Mike Elston and his loyalty, but also about, how it's important. You needed to do it.
Sure.
So I think for him, it was, for them, it was a financial promotion.
Sure.
I think the other thing too is, Brian Polian needs kind of different things to do since he's not, he just coaches special teams. And you and I both know special teams is only a small portion of practice. And it's kind of like, what else is he doing?
Yeah.
He's not coaching a position or anything. He's not like, he's the corners coach and also coaches special team. He just coaches special teams. So I think this kind of gives him a little bit more responsibility in some areas where, when the players are meeting with their position coaches, there's some things he can be doing that, maybe might be a little bit harder for Mike Elston to do because he's having to deal with his defensive line. Because as the special team coordinator, Brian Polian has 4 guys that he directly worries about, meaning he's got the kicker, the punter, and the snappers, but the returners, the cover players, those are all someone else's, they're linebackers, they're defensive linemen, they're corners, they're receivers, those kind of things. So I think having him as the associate head coach is part of it. And look, the sales job he did for Brian Kelly's recruiting efforts on signing day alone should have got him a promotion to associate head coach because that was one of the most impressive political spin jobs I've ever seen in my entire life.
Oh, you're right about that.
So, but he's a loyal soldier, and I think this is a chance to kind of get him into a role where he fits. And I also think that Brian Polian, from what I understand, would like to be a head coach again someday. And I think this is a role that will be really conducive for that. I think Mike Elston's at the point now where it's like, just let me go coach some ball. And now that he's the recruiting coordinator and the run game coordinator, he's even going to have his hands more in on the football team.
Sure.
If he's allowed to really direct the recruiting and say, hey, we're going to do this, we're going to go this route, we're going to implement these things, his stamp will be much more on this football program than it already was. Right now, as just the D-line coach, his stamp was on the defensive line. Well, what's been the driving force behind the Notre Dame success the last 3 years, the 33-5, the 2 playoff berths? It's been the defense. What's been the best part of the defense those 3 years? The defensive line. So clearly he's been able to get his group playing at a high level. Now if you allow him to sort of to drive the ship a little bit more, I think he's now going to have his fingerprints are going to be on even more of the football team now. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think it's a good thing for Notre Dame. If it's more than just a name only change, I think this is a good thing for Notre Dame.
Well, so let me backtrack just a little bit. He's losing the associate head coach title.
Believe so, yes.
Okay, so and you had mentioned, he just wants to coach ball, which I totally understand. So that associate head coach title is much more of an administrative title.
Correct.
You're doing a lot of stuff off the field to support the program.
Right.
Now, as a run game coordinator,
and you're the head coach when the head coach isn't there.
And so now, as a run game coordinator and the recruiting coordinator, now your focus is not as administrative, and now it's more back on the field.
Yes.
Is that a good summary of the situation?
I mean, he's always on the field as a D-line coach, but his secondary roles and third roles are now in the trenches.
Yes.
And I think Mike Elston is an in the trenches guy.
Yes.
That's where you want him. You want his DNA. You want his DNA on more parts of the program.
Right.
And I think this allows him to do that.
And I think Brian Polian is more of an administrative guy.
Correct.
In my opinion. And just based on what we see him doing during practices when it's not special teams time, I think he could be that kind of second general in command, organizing things off the field.
Sure.
Like, I think that this role actually fits him better.
He's been a head coach. Coordinator. He was the head coach at Nevada before he came back to Notre Dame. So, and I think he'd like to be head coach again. So I think this fits him well too. And certainly is a benefit there. So I think it fits both of them well. But I think for Mike Elston, this is a great opportunity for him to really have more buy-in as far as responsibility for the success of this program than he had before. Not buy-in as far as him being bought in, but there's more on his plate as far as we got to get this program to the next level. He's now going to have more say. I think more say is probably a better way of saying it than buy-in. And so I think it makes sense. So beyond just the pay raises.
Right, which is important because you want to keep them around.
Yeah, I think this, if this is legit and they're actually doing these things, and we never know, and I'm just saying
that's true.
I think it makes a lot of sense. It's because it's like we talk about the offensive. We'll wrap up with this, Vince. We talk about the offensive line. It's not just about getting the 5 best guys on the offensive line. They got to fit at the 5 positions.
Correct.
Developing a coaching staff is the same way.
It's exactly the same way.
You have to have a guy could be a really good corners coach, but then you put him in charge of the safeties and he's not as good, or vice versa. Or you got to find you got to get coaches in the right spots. And I think this is a much better. If things are actually how they are now, how they're being said from a job title standpoint, if they're actually that way, I think the combination of Mike Elston, Marcus Freeman is going to be more dynamic now. And then I think also the overall having Brian Polian and Mike Elston on staff, they're in much better positions to be successful as a staff and individually. I think if it is what they say it is, I think this is a really good move and it's going to make the program better, in my opinion.
Yep, I could not agree more. I think that this is a good move, and I think it fits both their personalities and kind of what they want to do on a day-to-day basis. So there it is. Mike Elston and Brian Polian kind of have swapped titles, but I'm sure their bank accounts are enjoying it. So congratulations to them, and we'll kind of see how this plays out as we move forward. So, hey, make sure, by the way, everybody that's watching this, make sure that you subscribe. Hit that subscribe button at YouTube, and also make sure you hit that little bell so that you can be notified when we've got new videos out, because we're kind of increasing our live mailbag. We want to get that going, so you want to be notified when that happens. And, of course, when we put stuff out. So make sure you subscribe and hit that bell, hit that notification bell. And, Brian, anything else? You're over
That's
here.
That's it, man. Let's rock and roll. Subscribe to the podcast and check out irishbreakdown.com.
Yep, there it is right there. If you can't audibly hear us, there it is visually, irishbreakdown.com. So for Brian, I'm Vince, and you've been listening to the Irish Breakdown Podcast.